Well, there is some talk in the trade, and if you look at the forecast, you can see that there is the potential for some heat to build into portions of the northern plains and the Corn Belt here as we get to the end of the month. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the severe weather damage from last week, wildfire smoke, and much more. Joining us for our weekly weather conversation. No shortage of topics to look at this week with Eric Stongrass from Nutrient Ag Solutions. Eric, thanks for being here with us. And I just want to start with the derecho event that went through parts of the central eastern Corn Belt last week, because that went through your neck of the woods. I know you shared some pictures, some trees that got picked up and replanted, so to speak, things like that. I mean, talk about just some of that damage that we saw roll through Iowa, Illinois, Indiana last week.
Yeah, you and I recorded that morning, and what was the discussion? I'm like, hey, there's some pretty nasty storms that could hit eastern Iowa, northwestern Illinois, get into central Illinois. I said we just got to watch. This is going to be an important setup to watch. And then by the time we got to the middle of the day, storms were leaving parts of eastern Iowa with speeds of 80 to 100 miles an hour. They got across the Mississippi and really ripped into north central and northwestern Illinois. Now, there's pockets of some pretty significant damage. In fact, a colleague of mine sent me a picture of nearby a town called Kewanee, which is in Illinois, and a grain bin had been knocked on its side and it just rolled right across the field, flattening all of the corn along its way. We saw a lot of damage and stuff like that. If you missed the winds, though, we got 2 inches of rain out of that thing. And relatively speaking, even though there are reports, almost 900 reports of severe wind damage, you look at it, it certainly met the criteria for derecho, but there's a lot of folks that got the beneficial rains out of this rather than the destructive aspects of those winds. And I think that's a really tricky thing to kind of decipher between the two. But yes, that was pretty rough after that event rolled through.
Okay. All right. Well, appreciate the update. Let's turn our attention to what things look like here for the rest of the month of July and into August. And I know right now, wildfire smoke coming out of Canada is an issue. And then, two, it sounds like we're going to turn the heat back on a little bit here for some areas of the country. So, talk about both of those things and what you're looking at right now.
Yeah, so through most of August, we have kept a big four corners ridge in place. And that's why from Arizona through California, parts of Oregon, Washington are now having their hottest start to any July on record. And hey, we're 22 days into July, so it's kind of hard to call that a start, right? I mean, it's most of the month has been record heat. So we've seen a lot of wildfires there. Out in the Atlantic, the Bermuda High is open, it's strong, it's just shoving moisture into the southeast where there's exceptional rains forecast for parts of Texas all the way to Virginia. In the middle has been the Midwest, and outside of the derecho and some of the thunderstorm clusters that have rolled out of the Northwest, which, by the way, a weekend ago, what was that, the 13th, way back, okay, we had another derecho that went through parts of western South Dakota. Didn't get a lot of news coverage, but it went through there as well. But outside of those storms, we've been cooler, we've been drier through parts of the Corn Belt, and that's been looked on pretty favorably, I think, as good conditions for pollination, given the moisture that's already in place. So where are we going with this? Well, I think the biggest thing that have to ask ourselves is any of that shifting? Are we going to get the heat that's in the west to open to the midsection of the country? Are we going to get the tropics to fire back up? And we had Beryl, but nothing really since Beryl, right? And as I look at it going forward, I think August is going to bring those two things in. I think we're going to start to open the heat more to the central United States with time. I think we're going to start to open up the Gulf more toward the midsection of the country, which means more storms. And we're going to have to be watching the tropics to fire off tropical systems, because the 3 big months for tropical season is August, September, October. And all of that's ahead of us. We're going to take the lid off the tropics and really get it fired up and clear out some of that Saharan dust and get the tropics fired up again. Now, in addition to all of that, we have another wild card. Actually, two, if you want to think about it. One is way over in the equatorial Pacific, right? Just to the north of it, like near the Philippines, heading toward Taiwan. There's a typhoon right now, and this is the time of year where those typhoons form. They move through China. They get into the Korean Peninsula. They get into the North Pacific and become a factor that influences our weather here 10, 15 days down the road. And by the way, this one coming through is going to be putting flooding rains on the Yangtze, Shandong province, getting toward like Beijing, the North China Plain, the Manchurian Plain. A lot of heavy rain coming from that. So there's that wild card. And then the other one is La Nina's trying to surface. And if we did get La Nina coming in, that would start to point toward a warmer overall August, historically looking at the correlations. So, it's once again another week where we've got 15 factors controlling the weather, but we're trying to keep our finger on the pulse of all of them.
Well, and it feels like too the markets early in the week trying to put some weather risk premium in for soybeans and spring wheat, because if we turn the heat up here on the U.S. crops, Northern Plains, Upper Midwest here over the next couple of weeks, it feels like that corn's on the tail end of its pollination time frame here. We still got some that's got to go, but it seems like more of the weather risk is kind of leaning to soybeans and spring wheat right now, Eric.
Yeah, and it was interesting when I was in South Dakota and just to see the spring wheat that's grown in some places there and what they're doing with it right now, and it was pretty impressive. But I always wondered, Jesse, when I was getting ready to talk to you this morning, like, is there anything else going on around the country? Just like, is there any political news or that was going to change the markets this morning? I figured it was one of those days where no one would care about the weather because it'd be something else, going on. But yeah, this is certainly a season of change right now.
Very, very true. Very, very true. Real quick on that wildfire smoke too. We saw some talk about that last year, that it was impacting crop development and helped kind of when things were really hot, it helped the crop move along well. Are we going to maybe see some of the opposite of that? Is some of that wildfire smoke keeping things too cool in some areas? Or, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So last spring, the Canadian wildfire smoke, we estimated, kept temperatures off maybe 4 to 7 degrees at times. So instead of when it was really dry in the Midwest, getting really hot, that wildfire smoke likely kept the temperatures down. So this year, all of the wildfire smoke coming out of Western Canada and also the Western United States, is it going to have the ability to knock the temperatures back? That's the big question. And right now, if you looked at the model forecast, the answer is no. They're trying to just open it back up to, generally speaking, 4 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit above average temperatures as we get, finish this month and start the next. Now, with that being said, the models can forecast all they want. Reality is smoke tends to cool things off in the Midwest when we have such prolific smoke coverage. The question will be, does Alberta and parts of Saskatchewan and then back to British Columbia get rain by the end of this week, early next week, to put the fires out and stop all of that wildfire smoke? That is a possibility as well.
All right. Folks can find more online, agweather.com, ag-wx.com. With that, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Eric, thanks for joining us this week. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Have a good one.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@markettalkag and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.